officially at Phoenix, we've had temperatures at 110 degrees or higher, and that dates back to June 30th. So yeah, 31 days worth. We live in a hot climate in the desert Southwest.
The sidewalk hits 145 degrees before noon. Hot enough to burn skin in seconds, hotter than the water in your kitchen tap turned all the way to scalding. For 30 straight days, the air temperature in Phoenix never dropped below 110. Some nights it stalled at 97, the hottest low ever logged in that city. And somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people had nowhere to go when the sun came up. No apartment, no air conditioning, no door to close, just concrete and a body that has to survive it anyway.
A third of Americans are under excessive heat advisories today. Historic temperatures and poor air quality are spreading across the country. NBC's Blaine Alexander is following all of it for us from Atlanta.
This is how they did it. By the second morning, the schedule flips upside down. Sleep happens in patches between 2 and 6 a.m., the only stretch cool enough to actually close your eyes. Everything else, the walking, the waiting, the errands, gets crammed into a narrow window before 9. After that, the ground itself turns into a weapon. Burn surgeons in Phoenix have treated patients whose skin fused to asphalt measuring 180 degrees. Not from fire, from falling down. So the first rule out here isn't shelter, it's shade. And shade is currency. A patch of it under a highway overpass gets fought over, negotiated, sometimes paid for in cigarettes or a few dollars. People learn the city's shadow map the way commuters learn a train schedule. Which tree line holds shade until 11, which parking garage stays dim past noon, which bus stop bench still has 3 feet of shadow at 2 in the afternoon. Outreach workers call it chasing the shade, and by July it's basically a full-time job, one that costs calories and sweat you can't spare. Shade only buys time though, it doesn't buy water. An adult loses close to a quart of sweat an hour in dry triple-digit heat, doing almost nothing but sitting still. Stretch that across 12 hours outside and the math turns brutal fast. Phoenix's answer was hundreds of hydration stations and cooling centres scattered across the valley, some staying open around the clock for the first time last summer. In one season alone, those sites logged more than 28,000 visits. Close to 30,000 of the people walking in gave the same reason when asked. They had nowhere else to be cool. A cooling centre only helps if you can reach one, and reaching one means walking straight through the exact heat you're trying to escape. Some people make that walk twice a day, morning and again at dusk. Others don't make it at all, and the sidewalk in between becomes its own kind of gamble. Here's where the body starts working against you. The heat doesn't just make a person uncomfortable, it starts failing them, quietly, in a specific order. First, the fluids go, then the electrolytes. Then, if nothing changes, the brain itself begins to cook, and heat stroke sets in before a person even realizes they've crossed the line from tired to dying. Doctors on the front lines describe patients who walked into a clinic complaining of nausea and dizziness, insisted they were fine, and were gone within days. One emergency room physician put it simply: people living outside get exposed to the heat almost constantly, in a way most housed residents never do. There's no walking inside to cool off. There's no inside. The ground keeps working against you even after dark. Concrete and asphalt soak up heat all day like a battery, then bleed it back out for hours after sunset. which is why the overnight low during a heatwave rarely feels low at all if you're sleeping on pavement. People learn to sleep on grass instead when they can find it, or on cardboard laid over dirt. Anything that isn't still radiating the afternoon back at them at 2 a.m. Clothing becomes a survival tool too, not a fashion choice. Long, loose, light-coloured sleeves get passed hand to hand at donation tents because covered skin burns slower than bare skin. A wide-brimmed hat gets guarded like a wallet. Sunscreen runs out by the second week in most camps. And after that, people improvise, wetting bandanas and draping them over the back of the neck, the one patch of skin that turns the whole body's cooling system on or off. It gets harder still when kids are involved. Family homelessness rises every summer alongside the temperature, and a child's body overheats faster than an adult's, with less warning before things turn serious. Parents in the encampments learn to read a toddler's flushed cheeks the way a mechanic reads a warning light. And a lot of them will skip their own water rotation to make sure a kid gets a second bottle. Outreach workers say that's usually the first thing that breaks a family's resistance to coming inside. Not their own exhaustion, their kids'. 2 weeks into a stretch like this, dehydration stops being the only threat. Skin starts to go. Doctors describe patients arriving with contact burns from falling onto hot ground, some unconscious before they even hit it. The injury and the fall happening in the same instant. Peeling skin gets mistaken for sunburn. Infected wounds get wrapped in whatever's on hand, because a proper bandage change means another walk through the heat to a clinic that might not have room anyway. 30 days of broken 2-hour sleep windows does something else too. Something less visible than a burn or a blister. Judgment starts to slip. People report losing track of which day it is, misjudging how far a shaded block actually is, forgetting to drink until the headache's already splitting. That kind of fog is exactly how a survivable afternoon turns into an ambulance ride. And it's why outreach teams treat the daily wellness check as seriously as the water drop. A 5-minute conversation. Are you eating? Are you drinking? Do you know what day it is? Cat is the ones who've quietly slipped past the point of protecting themselves. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a man named Stefan Livengood spent that same July laid out inside a makeshift shelter, struggling to breathe, vomiting, temperatures outside climbing past 110 for the 20th day running. He stopped at a free clinic once. They checked his blood pressure, told him it was fine, and sent him back out into it. The heat didn't care what the numbers on a chart said. That's the part almost nobody plans for going in. Surviving the heat is only half the job. The other half is surviving a system that's too thin, too far away, or already full by the time a person actually reaches it. The scale of it is staggering. Heat killed 645 people in Maricopa County in a single year. The worst toll the county had ever recorded, and just under half of them were homeless. Some died at bus stops. Some were found on open pavement, the concrete underneath them doing double duty as a deathbed. A county medical examiner said it plainly. So many people were already living close to the edge, and the heat simply pushed them over. And the severity ladder here doesn't stop at temperature. Nearly 2/3 of that year's heat deaths involved drugs or alcohol in the person's system. Not because addiction and homelessness are the same crisis, but because a body already fighting one emergency has almost nothing left to fight a second. A 19-year-old named Caleb Blair learned that the hard way. On a 115-degree afternoon, sick and overheating, he ducked into a convenience store looking for relief. The clerk told him he couldn't stay. He walked back out into it. A passerby called 911, and by the time paramedics reached him, his body temperature had climbed past 109 degrees. He didn't survive the night. So how does anyone last 30 straight days of this? Not alone. That's the piece the survival stories almost never lead with. The people who make it through are the ones plugged into a network. And the network out here is bigger and stranger than most viewers expect. Mobile medical units roll through the biggest encampments, checking blood pressure and redressing wounds from the back of a van. Volunteers hand out water bottles that disappear in minutes because the ice inside them is the only thing anyone actually wants at 3 p.m. Fellow campers wake each other at 2 a.m., not out of habit, but because somebody learned the hard way that a person who stopped responding needs to be found in minutes, not hours. There's an unspoken rule in most encampments. You check on your neighbour before you check on yourself. Somebody who slept through the coolest hours without moving gets a hand on the shoulder, a name called twice, before anyone goes back to their own bedroll. It's the kind of rule nobody writes down, and the kind that ends up saving more lives than any single piece of equipment. Then comes the strangest fact in the whole story, the one almost nobody sees coming. After the worst summer Phoenix had ever recorded, the city didn't lose the following year's fight. It clawed back ground. One heat relief site ran 24 hours a day for the first time, the only one in the entire valley doing that overnight. And other sites stayed open later than they ever had. Heat deaths fell by more than 40 the following summer, even though it was, on paper, a hotter one. Through those same relief sites, over 800 people experiencing homelessness got connected to shelter or permanent housing, families with young kids among them. The heat didn't get any kinder. The response did. That's the actual ending here, and it isn't the one you'd expect from an opening image of scalding pavement and a body count climbing every July. 30 days at 115 degrees with no walls and no air conditioning should be, on paper, a death sentence. For hundreds of people, it still is. But for the ones who make it through, the deciding factor is rarely grit alone. More often, it's a stranger with a water bottle, a night worker doing a head count at 2 a.m., a cooling centre that stayed open 1 hour later than it did the year before. So the next time you picture someone sleeping through a heatwave with nothing but a sidewalk and their own body between them and the sun, picture this too. Somewhere nearby, someone else is awake, walking those same blistering streets, checking that they're still breathing. Out here, survival was never a solo act. It was a network, built one water bottle and one wellness check at a time. And the question worth sitting with is simple. If one city cut its own heat death toll by dozens in a single year, just by keeping a few doors open a little longer, what's actually stopping every hot city in the country from doing the same?